Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq, coming to you live from CES 2024 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Joining us for this segment, we have Deborah Weinswig, founder and CEO of Coresight Research, to discuss consumer electronic retail trends that we can expect for 2024. Deborah, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to TradeTalks.
Thank you for having me.
What are the hot new product trends we can expect?
I mean, it's interesting, we're seeing a lot in biohacking right now. Things that we've heard about in the past that we're actually seeing physical products. In some cases it's prototypes, and we're hearing the actual product will be available in 25, but we're starting to see the theoretical become reality. So biohacking has been big. Secondly, we're seeing a lot around, kind of XR and digital twins. So this idea that you're in a physical space and you have somebody who's able to tell you kind of what to do in it, how to act. Think about like retail, real estate construction, and this idea that you can kind of predict potential issues before they arise. So that's been second. Third, what we're also starting to see, of course, AI is everywhere. And so whether it's chatbots, whether it's video analytics, whether it is demand forecasting, or basically personalization, loyalty, all of I think taking the friction out of the consumer experience. That's how I think about AI right now. Fourth, we're seeing a ton in supply chain, whether it's hardware or software, but we had supply chain challenges in 2020, they're back in 24, and how do we address those through technology and hardware? And then lastly, number 5, I would say as we think about the kind of future of food, there's a lot that's happening in terms of, food that kind of complements your DNA, or how are we growing it in greenhouses? So anything about like the whole food supply chain, but even from kind of like 3D printed food in some cases, all the way to the end, but how do we kind of not only develop it in a sustainable way, but also, about a third of food that's basically kind of grown ends up in landfill. How do we also start to think about that differently?
You had mentioned the consumer. Mm-hmm. What can tech brands expect consumer buying habits to be like in 2024?
Actually, I think in some cases, and I don't know if I've ever really thought about it this way, that the consumer is now ahead in some ways of some of the tech that's available. So what we're seeing is when it's coming on the market, they've already been anticipating it. So we're seeing very strong sell-through, and they're very willing to try new. So we got to experiment with the Meta Ray-Ban glasses today, right? And that was, and there's obviously going to be a lot more applications coming, but that was kind of an area of it. Secondly, we're seeing consumers really trying to do more in terms of not only from I would say a kind of task perspective. So how can they, if it used to take you 12 steps to do something, how can you bring that down to 2? And that could be, once again, your hardware or your software. So we're seeing the consumer very focused on how much time something takes. And then of course, anything around social media, Anything in terms of how to engage, it could be when you're shopping, How can you bring your friends in to shop with you? But that idea around having more voices when you're making purchase decisions, once again, there is a sustainability layer there, How do I make better decisions at the point of sale and not have to, engage in a return?
Which is so interesting, because in years past, it was always the advertisers or the marketers telling you what you think you need, and now you're seeing that totally turn to a 180, where brands are listening to what consumers want, which I think is really interesting, that there's a little bit more power with the consumers. So what can retailers expect in early 2024 following a decent holiday buying season?
I mean, we're continuing to, the challenge is with some of the supply chain issues, we're already hearing of inventory shortages. So I do think you'll have, and last time we went through this, you have much higher margins, and your sales will be as good as they can based on the inventory that you have. But I do think that this is starting to be very well communicated to the consumer. So what happens then is they're going to buy it at full price. They're not going to worry about it going on sale. If it's blue and they want red, they're okay with that. So I think there's that aspect. I think number 2, they're asking more questions about how it's made, where it's made, why it's made. Mm-hmm. So I think this idea going back to they're taking on the accountability themselves. And then lastly, they're trying to figure out, I think, from a how can I be the most efficient in getting the product, Is it buy online, pick up in store? Is it to have it delivered by drone? Is it to, someone is on their way home from said retailer and they'll drop it in my mailbox. But this idea of, and there's different costs with all of those. Do you want to pay for $10 for a drone delivery, like a $1.99 set, pack of hot dogs? I don't know, but if it's really important for game day, then it works. So it's been, I have to say, I think the retailers and brands are listening to the consumer unlike we've ever seen. and the consumer is very much engaged and willing to share data and information to have the right product at the right time for themselves.
Let's talk about the street, investors, okay? How will retail and tech stocks do in early 2024? What's your expectation there?
I mean, they definitely did better than I think many of us expected in 23. In 24, right, we're going to start to have everyone's, February we'll start to get everything from 4Q around holiday and how that performed. There is, I believe that AI, right, and we're still saying it's still very early, right? I mean, people are adopting it in chatbots and, personalized recommendation engines, but it's not necessarily wholesale changing the business, but it is saving money here and there. And what we're seeing is instead of doing kind of large scale ERP implementations, companies are thinking differently. So I think they're investing less in some areas of tech. And so I think that their earnings could look a bit better. I think top line will be okay, right? We have less inflation, so that's also, right, something to balance. I think margins are going to be good. So I think that fourth quarter will, on balance, be marginally better. And then I think going into first quarter, once again, because of some of these inventory shortages that are going to persist, that goes back to right where we saw it back in 2020, right? I mean, the top line was better and the margins were better. They sold less units, but what they sold at full price. So I've been very, and I'll tell you why I've been very gung-ho on retail. I've been long retail. I didn't think we'd have a recession last year. And this year, because of retail media networks, because of the opportunity to monetize data and your IP, retail is in a very interesting place right now, where of course you need to sell product, but a lot of it is around the data, and with Google being very aggressive on, let's just say, phasing out cookies, right, the retailers have first party data.
Right.
It's incredibly valuable across the global ecosystem.
All right, appreciate the insight, Deborah. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me from CES. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.